I quickly realized that I'm not gonna be able to make much money working as an engineer in Nepal. I fell in love with Okinawa rather than I fell in love with Japan for now. My father in particular, he really wanted me to be a doctor. Initially, I thought that, okay, I'm gonna have to move to another country.
So you found a recruiter on LinkedIn. Did you say, like, I'm not really too concerned where it is? I just want to find a good software engineering position. And they suggested Japan.
I didn't really have Japan in mind. I was like, okay, I think I'm gonna have to look for a job abroad. To the people who actually want to get in, they should consider looking for opportunities in Okinawa. Even though there's no other way around not learning Japanese, you have to do that, but you can get in pretty easily. Not just in Nepal, in India as well. Getting a job is really hard, and a lot of engineers, right, they are either moving to countries like Japan or Germany and Australia as well.
Welcome to the Japan Dev Podcast. I am Eric, founder of JapanDev.com, and today I am talking to Raj, who is a system engineer in Japan. And in fact, he's actually working in Okinawa. So I'm super interested to learn a little bit more about his story, how he ended up in Okinawa, how it's going, working as an engineer, living in Japan. We're going to go through the whole story, and I think there's going to be some great insights. So welcome, Raj. Thank you so much for joining.
Thanks, Eric, and thank you so much for inviting.
Yes, thank you. It's a really unique one. So let's get started, I think, just with your kind of early life. You grew up in Nepal, is that right?
So it was a remote village in Nepal. No electricity, right? No roads, that sort of village it was. And growing up without really, much access to the English medium schools. So I actually attended schools that had all the curriculum in Nepali language, the local language itself,
Okay.
and got exposed to the English language a lot later in life when I attended the secondary school. So I moved to a city, attended an English medium school, really got interested in watching those Hollywood movies, right? And that's how I got introduced to English and learned it.
Wow. So you started out not knowing English and you learned at least, so I guess there were a couple steps between where you started and then now ending up in Japan. But I guess the first was you had to learn English, and that helped you, I guess, be a little bit more internationally focused in your studies and things like that. But how did you, I see that you went to university for computer science, and that was through a university that's actually based in Malaysia, right? But you went to the Nepal, I guess, branch of that university. How did you end up finding that program and, like, kind of, I guess, getting into computer science enough to want to study it?
Parents, my father in particular, he really wanted me to be a doctor, actually. So
Okay.
he wanted me to join the medical school, and that was the time when I left home, moved to a city, and started, preparing for the medical school. I just knew as the time went by that I don't really want to do it, the medical school thing.
Did
And
you start university classes assuming you were going to be a doctor, like a pre-med kind of program?
so they have this preparatory program going on in Nepal. So you gotta take the entrance test in order to get into a school, right? So I went through the preparation. I attended the preparatory programs. I took the test, the entrance test as well, and I didn't really got selected for the scholarships, but I could get the admission. So I really had to rethink about whether or not I really want to spend my money attending a medical school because it's really expensive. And since I didn't really want to do it at the core, right? So I had to convince my father somehow, that, hey, I really don't want to attend a medical school. How about the engineering school? Because my entire family tree, it's, the generation of doctors, right? So they wanted me to pursue a medical school as well. But I did somehow convince my father that, hey, I want to do engineering and stuff. And after that, I, looked into all the universities in Nepal that offered the engineering programs. And, the local universities in Nepal. So when I went through the curriculum, right, they don't really have software engineering focused degrees in
Right.
Nepal. So they have this thing called the computer science engineering. So it's an engineering degree, but you don't really get to study the software side of the things. So it's much more hardware focused sort of degree. I really wanted to do the software side of things, right? So that's when I started searching for programs that are affiliated to the foreign universities, right? And that's how I got introduced to the infrastructure university, Kuala Lumpur degree. And initially I thought that okay, I'm gonna have to move to another country and attend the school, but I found out that they do have their branch campus in Nepal as well. And so I decided to take admission in the school and attended it. So it was quite an interesting journey for me as well.
Wow. So at that point, when you decided to do the computer science degree through the Malaysian university, did you have any inkling that at some point maybe you wanted to move to Japan? Like, had you really been exposed to Japanese culture at all? Like, was that an idea yet or not yet?
Okay, honestly, I never got really interested in, things like the Japanese animes, or, I had friends who were really into Japanese animes, right? They, always used to talk about it in classes as well, or in cafes, right? The center of the talk would be those Japanese animes and all, but I was never interested in it, to be honest. I never really looked into the Japanese culture and stuff as well. So it was a random decision, to be honest, to come to Japan.
Okay. So I think before that, though, you graduated from university. You studied like computer science. So, like you mentioned that within Nepal there weren't many software engineering focused programs, but you were able to find one. So you were doing like programming and stuff at that point, right?
Yeah, so the before programming, so when I was in school, I used to do those graphic design things. So that's how I developed an interest in computers and all. And getting into a school, I just thought that hey, I'll learn something and I'll get to make something cool on my own, and that's how I just decided that hey, computer science is something that I really want to do.
Right.
And
So yeah, you want to be
yeah,
able to build your own projects, like have an idea and actually turn it into something that you can use, whether it's a website or a service, an app, things like that. So you decided that in order to make that happen, you had to study engineering and programming and like software, right?
right.
Okay, cool. So you did that, you graduated from university, and you decided to then start working as a software engineer. And that was in Nepal, right? In Kathmandu. So what was that first experience like actually working as a software engineer? Like, how did that kind of go?
Okay, so the first challenge that I faced, was getting a job itself, because the job market is quite different in Nepal. So what I really mean to say is they don't really look for people who are good at DSAs and stuff. All right. So most companies, those IT companies in Nepal, they pick their projects from abroad. Most are the outsourced ones, right? And they have a deadline to deliver, so they have a particular tech stack that's already decided, right? So the job market is like, hey, I need a Python developer, right? Or I need a Java developer. I don't care if you know DSA or not, I just want someone who can, write programming in Java or write program in Python. So in the university, the degree was more focused on the DSA side. It wasn't really focused on learning to make programs in Java, but it was really focused on solving DSA questions in C++, right? So
Right. So data structures and algorithm questions, like,
right.
yeah, rather than, I guess, the day to day work of an engineer can be pretty far removed from that, actually, when it's just like, hey, we need this set of specifications, like some software that does this for this client. It needs to be written in this language,
Right.
that can be maybe a little bit of a surprise when you're like, oh, I don't need to be thinking about how to design data structures and which ones to use and like the big O notation, about this. It's more
Right.
just like you have like a spec and you need to write some code that fulfills it, right?
Right. So in the university, I didn't really learn Python just in order to get a job. So I had to, learn Python and, learn how to create a server in Python, or, how to, connect with a database, right? It wasn't really something that I, studied in the university. So I
Right.
definitely found a gap, and I had to fill it in myself, learning a programming language rather than, going through those DSA and stuff. So
Right.
it was quite an interesting journey, but yeah, so that's how I got a job. It was a Python developer job that I got, and I
Cool.
had to learn everything from scratch in my internship at the company. So they wanted me to go through the entire documentation of it was Django, so they would use the Django framework, right? So I had to go through the entire documentation, learn to make a server, learn to create the REST APIs and stuff, and it was really different. And a majority of the times I also used to think that, hey, why did I have to go through all of those courses in the university? I'm not using it anymore, but it was fun. I guess it was more of a cognitive exercise in the university, I guess.
Right, right. Yeah, I think that's a common experience that a lot of people have. There are a lot fewer like binary trees and graphs than they expected in their actual day-to-day work as a software engineer, So, especially if you're doing like web development and things like that, it's pretty far removed, I think, from like the data, like the hard data science kind of elements. But yeah, that's cool though. You're able to kind of get the other side of the skills necessary through that first job, and you were doing kind of consulting work, I guess, right? And but then after like maybe a little under a year of that, from what I can tell, it looks like you decided to then make a move to Japan and switch jobs and come to not just Japan but Okinawa. So where did that come from? How did that happen?
So I quickly realized that, I'm not gonna be able to make much money, working as an engineer in Nepal. So I didn't really have Japan in mind. I was like, okay, I think I'm gonna have to look for a job abroad. And that's when I decided to, search for jobs on LinkedIn. And I started, looking for the recruiters,
Okay.
who can get me connected with the companies abroad. And Japan was an interesting choice because the CEO of my current company as well, right? He speaks English, he understands English, right? And it was really easy getting connected with the company that I'm working in right now. Even the interviews and everything the company arranged for me, right? So I had an initial impression that, hey, language is not really going to be a big problem. And the CEO of a Japanese company, right, he's ready to talk with me, whom I've met online, right, and really supportive. The company would take care of the entire visa processes as well. And it was a quick decision because I didn't really have to do a lot of things myself, right, from the visa processing to finding an apartment in Okinawa. So yeah, but I did interview to yet another company based in Osaka, but they wanted a pretty high level of Japanese. And so even though I took the interview in English itself, right, they were like, hey, I don't think that you can learn Japanese pretty quickly in the pace that we want you to learn Japanese, right? So I think you need to look for other opportunities, and we're not gonna hire you this time. But
I see.
the company that I'm working in right now, they were really flexible with everything. So it was actually a really easy decision for me to make because everything was being handled by the company I'm working in, and
Wow.
I didn't really have to think a lot.
That's cool. So you went on LinkedIn and you just searched for jobs, or did you go through a recruiter through LinkedIn and they introduced you to this position in Okinawa?
Actually, I went through a recruiter,
Okay. So you
and
found, yeah,
yeah.
so you found a recruiter on LinkedIn and you didn't necessarily say like, yeah, I want to go to Japan or I want to go to Okinawa. It was just like, I want to go somewhere else because I don't feel like maybe there was much of a career path in, Nepal where you were. So can you just find me some other positions around? And like, did you say like I'm not really too concerned where it is? I just want to find like a good like engineering position, software engineering position that has like a good kind of career path, and they suggested Japan? Like, was that just kind of like fate, like kind of random like that?
Actually, the recruiter was specific to Japan.
Okay.
So, yeah, it was a Tokyo based recruiter, right? Who would bring a list of companies from all over Japan
Okay.
that are open to hiring the international engineers. And the process was pretty easy because I didn't really have to take interviews in Japanese. In fact, they didn't want any Japanese at all, until the time I get selected. Right. So they didn't really expect me to, speak anything or know anything about it. Right. So it was like you get introduced to a company, interview for it, right, get selected, and then start learning Japanese.
Wow, that's awesome. So the company is run, I mean, you mentioned the CEO speaks English, but it's a Japanese person who created this company in Okinawa and for whatever reason wanted to hire some people from overseas, some foreign engineers, and a recruiter was able to, find that position for you. Were you the first non-Japanese hire they made, or were there already some other foreigners there?
So there was a guy from Spain. He already used to live in Okinawa. He actually attended a Japanese language school, and so he got hired. And then the CEO, he is still looking forward to expanding the company overseas as well.
Right.
And as I mentioned earlier, if you see the Nepalese market, it's really popular for finding cheap labor, right? Cheap
Okay.
labor force.
Uh-huh.
So they are always looking for engineers and companies based in Nepal to really get the job done. And the CEO, he wants to expand the company overseas as well. And he always talks about how he wants to expand the company in Nepal as well, or, any other prospective, countries.
Right.
And that's how he's actually really open to hiring international engineers with a
Wow.
condition that, hey, you need to learn Japanese once you get in.
Oh, I see. So since you've been here, there's been a push for you to learn Japanese.
Yeah, in fact, after I got selected for the job, when I was in Nepal itself, I hadn't moved to Japan. So they would provide me money, the money to, really learn Japanese in Nepal
Wow.
itself.
Wow.
So they wanted me to take the introductory course so that I don't really struggle after moving to Okinawa, moving to the company, because nobody else except the CEO speaks English. So yeah, I had to take the introductory course.
Wow. I mean, if you're serious about learning Japanese, I feel like that's a great way to do it because you're kind of thrown into the deep end in a sense where you have kind of no choice, right? If you want to get your work done and, move up in the company and everything, I guess you would really have a strong need to work on your Japanese. So did you get pretty good at Japanese pretty quickly?
Yeah, so it's pretty much like throwing yourself, out of your comfort zone, right? And
Right.
do it even if you don't really enjoy it, sort of things, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's probably the fastest way to learn is to just be in a situation where you need Japanese to do your work, to kind of live your life, and you have really no choice. So you just do it, right?
Yeah, because initially when I used to talk to the recruiter who got me connected with the company that I'm working in right now, when I talked with the CEO of the company that I'm working in, I actually thought that, hey, Japanese people, they talk English, I'm not really gonna have a lot of problem. But, and even when I was learning Japanese in Nepal, right, I didn't really thought that I would struggle up that much after moving to Japan. The reality, it was really different. So, you know, the CEO, right, he's not gonna sit around me every day, talking to
Right.
me or, asking me if I have any problems and, not being able to understand any Japanese at all and, having to, deal with the project manager or the supervisor, right, in Japanese. It was a total different sort of experience, right? Carrying your phone, translating everything that you want to say and trying to type in everything they say in dictionary and trying
Wow.
to understand. It was a really different experience.
So you've been there now for about 2 years. So would you say that I guess you've been working primarily in Japanese pretty much that whole time. So have you gotten over that initial language barrier, and do you feel pretty comfortable now working in Japanese?
Yeah, so Japanese has been quite a different sort of experience for me
Mm-hmm.
because I think I learn a lot better when I'm, actually learning things as I, face it, the situation.
Hmm.
I mean, if I'm in a situation, right, in a particular situation and I need to know how to say something, I need to know how to express that thing in Japanese.
Hmm.
I would go to the translator and translate it in Japanese
Hmm.
and memorize it.
Hmm.
How to say such sort of things, and I actually learned that way. I didn't really go through any textbooks and all to
Hmm.
learn Japanese. So, using that roadmap as well, I think I'm pretty comfortable right now. And I don't really face problems, dealing with the supervisor or the colleagues.
Hmm.
And it's getting a lot easier as the time is going by, passing by. So, yeah.
I see. So you mentioned that they see Nepal, I guess, as kind of a cheaper way to get talent. Is that right?
Yeah.
So I don't know. I guess I'm wondering, like, did you ever like? I mean, I guess how you kind of think about that as someone from Nepal. Like, do you resent that image that they have of Nepal at all, and think like, I learned the same skills and I can write the same code, and as the people in Japan, like I should be worth as much, or like, do you see Japan as kind of like a foothold because maybe the average salaries are a bit higher here? You see it as like a way of kind of increasing your value by establishing yourself here, or like how do you kind of think about like that at this point, in your career?
At this point in my career, I think I take it as an opportunity, to be honest.
Mm.
Right? So, in fact, if you look at the Ministry of Labor of Nepal, so they have this agreement with countries like Japan or Germany
Mm.
that, if you want to, hire Nepalese people for employment,
Mm.
you can't really ask them for money, right? So the visa fee, the ticket fee, right?
Mm.
All of
Mm.
them have to be free. So you hire
Mm.
them, you take them, and it has to be free. So this such sort of agreement between the governments as well.
Mm.
And as I said earlier, right, I realized pretty quickly that I'm really not going to be able to make much money
Mm.
working as an engineer in Nepal itself.
Mm.
So, for me, it was like finding an opportunity elsewhere, right?
Yeah,
And going there, developing, your career in software engineering. So that's how I took it. That's how I look at it right now as well.
I see.
And
Yeah, I mean that makes
yeah,
sense. I think even within the same country, like for example, if you're from like the Midwest or somewhere in America or from the South, and not near any big cities, then it can make a lot of sense to move to like Silicon Valley or New York City because, that's where the kind of opportunities are. And if you
yeah.
just look at it's kind of like if you live in a small hometown or whatever, it's like, yeah, if I really want to have this kind of career trajectory where I'm earning like a pretty good salary and stuff like that, it might not really be feasible here. So maybe the next step is to move to one of these places. And in your case, it was just from Nepal to a different country. In this case, Japan. Would you say that you saw it as like a way to basically just advance kind of in your career and become more of like an international engineer, where like maybe you could work in different places within Japan or potentially other countries? So would you say that you felt that it was just like a better kind of career step for you?
Yeah, that's actually how I thought about it.
Mm.
And
Okay.
see, if you look at the educational institutions as well,
Mm.
and I can also talk about the colleges in India, not just in Nepal.
Mm.
So, when you are in the final semester of the university, right? So, a lot of recruiters from Japan, and I can say that with surety that they just visit the college,
Mm.
right? And
Uh,
they pitch how they can advance their career as engineers in Japan, and
mm.
how they should think about it, moving to Japan.
Mm.
And I guess the students from their university times, they already have an exposure to the idea that hey, they can build a career in Japan as an engineer, because not just in Nepal, in India as well, right? Getting into the market, getting a job is really hard, and you don't really make much as junior engineers, right? And you go through all the hardships, and you always wish that you get higher salary, or you
Yeah.
always wish a better career trajectory, right? But you don't really get to imagine a better exposure and international exposure in countries like Nepal. So a lot of engineers, right, they are either moving to countries like Japan or Germany, and a lot of them are moving to Australia as well, right,
Yeah.
searching for opportunities. A lot of people, including me, of course, look at that as an opportunity to grow.
Okay, I see. Yeah, I mean that makes total sense. I think it's not even necessarily like a Nepal specific thing. There's always going to be probably a place, whether it's in the same country you're already in or somewhere nearby or some other country where you can go if you really just want to focus on career growth. That's going to be probably more efficient time wise, right? So I think that makes a lot of sense. So let's talk a little bit about Okinawa specifically. So you mentioned that the company took care of your visa. I'm assuming you're on like an engineering specialties in humanity, the typical kind of engineering visa. And the company also, did they help with like relocation and like finding an apartment, or did you have any issues with that when actually looking like for a place to live when you first got to Okinawa?
Actually, I had no problem finding, an apartments and all, because they would send me the links to the apartments.
Okay. So someone at the company helped out and like found some
Yeah.
options for you, and then you chose one of those basically.
Yeah, not just the apartments, but they would, buy me stuffs for the
Wow.
apartment as well. Like
Wow.
the refrigerator or the ACs, right? So they would arrange pretty much everything for me. So it was a lot easier for me to relocate.
Wow.
And yeah, not just that, everything related to creating a bank account, or those city office works, right, where you have to know Japanese to some level, right, to get your things done. So the HR of my company, she would actually go to places with me, so it was really easy for me, to be honest. Yeah.
That's awesome. So I guess the point really is have a company if you can that's willing to help you out with that stuff because there
Yeah.
are some potential points of friction I think when it comes to especially getting a bank account and setting up your cell phone plan and all that kind of stuff. Obviously an apartment. I think it's a little bit easier perhaps in Okinawa. I think it's a little bit more chill like in Tokyo. I think there's maybe a bit more competition in the market, and maybe as a result, it can be a little bit more difficult to find apartments, especially as a foreigner, because most landlords would prefer, I think, to rent to a Japanese person who they see as like a bit more stable or whatever. But in lower density kind of areas like Okinawa, I think it's probably not as big of an issue from what I've heard. But it's good to hear that you were able to find something pretty quickly, and that didn't have too big of a negative impact on your initial kind of impression of Japan. So that's
Yeah.
awesome. So the company helped out, and you got established in Japan. And what is like your, I guess, lifestyle kind of like there? I mean, are you near the beach? Like, what is the like? I guess what is life like as a software engineer in Okinawa?
Life as a software engineer, I have two perspective in it. So
Okay.
if you look at it from the finding a tech community in Okinawa, or trying to connect to people from the same industry, right? It's actually really hard. So I did try to search for the tech communities in Okinawa, but I find none. I mean, particularly the community with people who talk in English, right? So
Yes.
I had a hard time finding that, and that's how I actually got introduced to the Edge in Tokyo, but it was based in Tokyo, right?
Right.
And apart from that, if you look at the lifestyle in Okinawa, it's actually really good. So, and I did meet a lot of guys who would work for a Tokyo-based company as engineers, but living in Okinawa only because they really love how the Okinawa has to offer people, right? The chill environment, right? Beaches everywhere, and you don't really need to drive hours to get to a beach, right? And the food is awesome, the people are awesome, right? So, and I was quite surprised for the fact that, the Okinawans, they are really, friendly with the foreigners as well, right? Are really open to them, so you don't really struggle. Also, things as small as, finding an English menu at the restaurants, right? So you don't really face a lot of problems living in Okinawa, and it's quite actually chill. So yeah, it depends what you are actually looking for. So as I said, if you're looking for big communities and all, getting to attend a meetup, I didn't really find any. But if you're looking for a chill lifestyle, right, Okinawa should definitely be a place to look for, I think.
So that's interesting. Because, yeah, I mean, I was wondering about the tech community there. And it sounds like maybe there is a small one, but it's mostly in Japanese and I guess filled with Japanese people rather than other international people from maybe other countries who are working in Japan. But have you been able to make like some kind of connections and maybe like have like kind of a friend group of kind of similarly minded like tech focused people, or has it been pretty difficult? Would you say?
Actually, it has really been difficult for me to connect with people in tech in Okinawa, in particular, only because, I'm not really fluent in Japanese. So, they do have quite a few events every now and then in tech as well, but all of them are in Japanese, right? And, if you don't really have, a native level fluency in Japanese, you don't really feel connected.
That's
So
interesting.
for English speakers, it's quite difficult, I guess, in Okinawa.
I see. So, where exactly in Okinawa are you based? You're on the main island, but you're not in Naha, right? You're relatively close, but in another city. What is it called again?
It is Ginowan, so it's 10 kilometers away from Naha.
Okay. So, like, kind of, but very close to Naha, though, I suppose.
Right.
That's interesting. But there's still not much in terms of English language tech community there.
Yeah, so recently, even the company I work in, they sponsored in an event called Razor Take Okinawa. But, all of the events and, all the programs in the event were in Japanese. So it's quite difficult to really understand what's going on and, connect.
I see. Yeah. So, I guess maybe as a result of that, have you ever thought about maybe trying to do what you described that you saw some other people doing, which is having like a Tokyo-based position, but then living within Okinawa, or maybe like moving somewhere else in Japan where there is more of like a foreign, I guess, international tech scene, or like how do you think? I mean, how do you think about that now, and maybe going forward? Like, is that something you would consider, maybe moving to somewhere like Tokyo, to one of the bigger cities, or do you want to stay in Okinawa? Do you think?
Since I'm in the earlier phase of my career, right, I would definitely, like to move to Tokyo. I guess I'll get exposed to more people in the tech community. And again, I think it'll be a lot easier for me to connect with the people as well, since, there are foreign engineers and a number of, tech group going on, meetups going on.
Yeah.
So I think it'll be a lot easier for me to progress in the industry. Yeah, I definitely look forward to moving to Tokyo in the future.
I say. Have you ever been to Tokyo?
Actually, not, but I would
Okay.
love to. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's interesting. I think it'll be super interesting to see how you feel about it when you visit. Obviously, some people absolutely love it, others not so much. There are some downsides to being in the big city. Obviously, it's more expensive in terms of cost of living, and usually the salaries are higher as well. So that's generally okay if you can find like a good position. But it's also a bit crowded, is the one thing that might be a bit of a shock coming from somewhere like Okinawa. And there's just a lot of people, stuffed into a pretty small space. So if you're able to kind of find ways to get around that and avoid like having too many of those kinds of issues, and you can kind of get a good work situation where like either you're working remotely or like you have some kind of greenery nearby, or like a river, or like some nature hopefully that you can be at least close to get away from the people. I think it can be an amazing environment, but it might be a little bit of a shock though, to be honest.
Right.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm sure it'll also be nice maybe if you've been in Okinawa now for a bit to also try something else. Like I did something similar. Actually, I was in the kind of Inaka of Toyama Prefecture for a year when I first arrived in Japan. And it was really cool, actually. I got to experience that slower pace of life and then moved to Tokyo after that and kind of experienced both. So I'm really glad I did that. I mean, if you really want to advance in your career, I think it's hard to beat Tokyo, to be honest. So, or, I mean, you can, the other thing you can do, obviously, is work for a Tokyo company and live in Okinawa. And depending on the company, I mean, you might be able to like travel back and forth on the company's dime, every now and then and just get to kind of experience Tokyo as a tourist, for like whatever, a weekend here, a week or two here and there, and still be based in Okinawa, but earning kind of a Tokyo based salary. That might be kind of ideal also. I don't know if you've thought about that, but
Yeah, I actually did put a thought on that as well, especially meeting the guy I was talking about who, is working for a company based in Tokyo, but he lives in Okinawa just because he, loves the lifestyle in Okinawa, right? It's what the Japanese call non-biri, right? So you
yes.
don't really care much or,
Yeah,
right?
carefree.
So,
Yeah, that's what I've heard also about living in Okinawa. It's a very chill, kind of much slower kind of pace of life, and a lot of people prefer that to Tokyo, where it can be a little bit stifling, maybe at times, and just a little overwhelming, maybe I would say. But yeah, so that could be, and you could kind of try, you could experience both. Maybe come to Tokyo for a bit and see which one you like better. It's just another data point. But that's cool. So I'm curious about like your actual work. So you're working as a software engineer, and I think you mentioned that your company does like a mixture of in-house development. So like you're building your own products, but then you also do like a bit of consulting also. So do you like a mixture of those two things?
yeah, so the company is actually really focused at serving the local communities in
Hmm.
Okinawa at its core. So what it really does is the what they call it circular economy, right?
Hmm.
So they have this project where they
Hmm.
basically use the bagasse.
Hmm.
So that's the sugarcane that comes from sugarcane, right?
Hmm.
And they actually converts it to the clothes, right?
Hmm.
And they don't really sell it, but they rent it out so that they can get it back.
Hmm. Hmm.
Right? If you sell it, right, it's not coming back. So the person who buys it, they may end up throwing it.
Wait, so like sugarcane based like textiles for clothing,
Right.
and then your company but does software to enable that kind of like manufacturing process?
Okay, so what I really wanted to say is, so they use sugarcane to manufacture those shirts, right, or the
Uh-huh.
garments, and they
Right.
rent it out to the tourists who would come to Okinawa
Okay.
for a visit, right? What they would do is they take it back and make sure that they can actually recycle it
Mm.
on their own,
Mm.
and they're just trying to make sure that they are contributing to the environment in general.
Mm.
So that's the core product of what the company I'm working is doing,
Hmm.
right? And apart from that, there are some client-based projects.
Uh-huh.
So there are a couple of clients from Osaka and even Tokyo,
Mm.
and in that there are software development projects
Mm.
where I'm involved in right now. So, and there are a few in-house projects as well, those
Mm.
software development projects that are also targeted to the local communities or contributing to the climate in general.
Mm.
So yeah,
Wow.
it's really focused in the sustainable development
Mm.
and the sustainable development goals.
That is really cool. I think it would be easy to like kind of feel good about the work you're doing day to day, right? Because you're helping the environment and also the local kind of community in Okinawa, which is really important, I think. And it sounds like it's even enabling like some cultural experiences and stuff for people who visit, and maybe helping to preserve some kind of cultural aspects of like the Okinawan, I guess, culture, right? With like the sugarcane based garments and stuff like that. So that sounds like a really cool thing to be kind of spending your time on.
Yeah, so most of the projects are like that, and this one of the projects that came out of the Okinawa Institute of Science and Technology as well as a startup, right? It's called
Mm.
Watasumi Project. So what they do is they treat the waste water, and it came out of the Okinawa Institute of Science and Technology. They,
Right.
hired engineers from the company that I'm working in. So to work on the device, programming the device that they were using, and they would, plant the devices in different prefecture in Japan. So that's basically what the company that I'm working in is primarily focused on, is to contribute to projects that has, positive impacts to the climate
Right.
in general.
Wow, that's awesome.
Right.
And you have clients from Osaka and also, I guess, from Okinawa. You mentioned the Okinawa Institute of Science and Technology. I've heard actually many great things about that. Like it's a university, I guess. And from what I understand, they do a lot to help kind of, I guess, people who want to build companies and startups, and a lot of like really great, I get, research and things like that is actually done there, from what I understand. Do you think that there's a lot of opportunity in Okinawa? Like, as long as you speak Japanese, like, do you think it's a good place to work as a software engineer? Like, there are a lot of positions and a lot of like things going on, or do you think it's a little bit questionable and maybe you would advise people to instead try to go to like somewhere like Tokyo?
Okay, so what I felt about the tech scene in Okinawa is that even if the companies wouldn't really consider hiring who aren't really, willing to learn Japanese, they are actually really open to hiring people who don't really have much experience in the industry. Even in the, what do you say, the mid-level career positions, right? So they are willing to, hire people, right, who are willing to learn about the tech or what they do. So there isn't much barrier about in the skills side. Sure, they need commitment in learning Japanese, because not a lot of foreign engineers are there in the companies, as far as I know. But I think looking at the companies in places like Tokyo or Osaka, right, the big cities, there are a lot of big tech companies, I guess. But I think the competition is high, and you need some level of expertise in what you're doing. And yeah, I think if you want to get started in the tech industry, right, willing to put in effort in Japanese, I think Okinawa is definitely a place to you know consider if you're just trying to get in. And you can definitely work your out to finding opportunities elsewhere in Japan as well, as you progress, learn the skills, develop your skills. So I have such sort of impression about Okinawa.
I say. Yeah, because I guess if you're coming from overseas, especially, it can be really tough to find companies that are willing to help relocate you, especially if you're more junior. So it sounds like since there's maybe not as much competition in Okinawa, taking a position there can be maybe a way to get to Japan first and get a little bit established here, start working on learning the language, and then you can kind of decide later if you want to keep that environment and maybe try to, advance by looking at working remotely for a company based somewhere else, or maybe moving to Tokyo at some point or somewhere like that, Osaka or Fukuoka somewhere. Um, but it's maybe at least a good first step, and you may really fall in love with like the environment there and not want to leave, of course. But even if you did decide you wanted to like take the next step and go to like somewhere like Tokyo, then you would have that door kind of opened by being there, right?
Yeah, and I think if you have a really good Japanese, right, and you want to get started in the industry, you want to give it a shot, then Okinawa is definitely a place to look at, because a lot of my colleagues in the department that I'm working in, they don't really come from the IT background or the computer science background, right? So, in fact, all of them are from the physics or some sort of other business degrees. But since they are willing to learn the software side of things as well, learn to program, the company is willing to give them the opportunity. And it's not just in the company that I'm working in. I can say about other companies as well based in Okinawa, right? They're just willing to hire anyone who is just willing to learn.
So they're willing to give people a chance.
Yeah, that's what I felt. I mean, it is my experience, so all the people's experience might be different.
Yeah, that's great because yeah, it can definitely be tough to break into somewhere like Tokyo. there's just so much competition, so many people who want to kind of be working there. I think that makes a lot of sense. And it sounds like you've got a pretty great thing going there. And I guess in terms of like the cost performance and everything, like the costs are pretty low. So I assume you can live like a pretty nice lifestyle. Would you say that that's true? Like without spending too much, you're able to live like a really nice kind of lifestyle there.
Yeah, and if you when I actually compared, earning in Tokyo and, earning as a software engineer in Okinawa, I don't really think there's much of a difference in terms of
Mm.
the pay scale. I mean, if you find a good company, right, you will earn, in Okinawa as well, even though the costs are really low. So,
Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think the
So
income is also not something to be really worried about,
mm,
working as an engineer in Okinawa, thinking that hey, the pay scale is might be low, but I don't think that is also the case.
I say. So even if it's like a little bit lower, the difference is easily covered, probably more than covered by the lower cost of living, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. And I guess like day to day, would you say that your company has like a pretty good work life balance, or are you doing any kind of like overtime work, or like how does that work?
Actually, it's really good. I haven't really felt any sort of pressure from my seniors or the supervisors, asking me to work overtime or, giving me enough, much pressure about the work and all.
Hmm.
It's kind of chill, to be honest.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's great to hear. And I mean, it fits with my overall image of Okinawa as being just like a pretty chill, relaxed, numbirishita location, right?
Yeah, actually, I've heard such sort of things in companies, in Tokyo, in fact, right? So,
Yeah.
what they call it, pawahara or something,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Power
So,
harassment,
yeah,
where like, yeah, I mean, your boss will kind of like essentially use their power over you to try to force you to work longer hours and, work in kind of poor work conditions and things like that. Those are definitely major issues, I think, in maybe the Japanese business world at large, but especially probably in larger sort of cities. And I feel like I suspect it's not as big of an issue in Okinawa from what I know about it.
yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. I mean, that's good to know. And yeah, I mean, do you do you take advantage of having the beautiful beaches and everything so close by? Like, are you doing, I don't know, surfing or any kind of like water sports or hobbies and stuff like that? Or do you really enjoy having the ocean nearby? Like, are you an ocean kind of person?
Okay, coming from a landlocked country
Right.
like
I
Nepal,
was
right?
gonna
It
say.
was definitely, yeah. So
Yeah.
I was really amazed, looking at the ocean, really
Mm,
fascinated by it. And I consider myself an outgoing person, so I like going to hikings and all. So that's one of the things which I really like about Okinawa, right? A lot
okay.
of beaches, and you can actually walk and, get to a beach because there are a lot of them in Okinawa,
Yeah.
right? You don't even have to take, public transport or something,
Mm,
and a lot of hiking routes as well,
nice.
which you can take. So
Right.
if you like outdoors, Okinawa is really a great place to live.
Yeah, that's interesting. And you mentioned public transportation. Do you find that that's sufficient to kind of get wherever you want? Like within Tokyo, at least, like the trains are extremely good. You don't really need a car, I would say. Like I think some people have one, obviously, but it's more of like a luxury, or like if you have kids or like a big dog or something like that, you got to be carrying around, then you would maybe want one. But day to day commuting and stuff like that, it's all trains. That's enough. Would you say that's true in Okinawa too, or do you have a car also, or like how do you kind of think the best way is to get around?
Okay, it's one of the really, hard things that I had to face after coming to
Okay.
Okinawa because there are no trains in Okinawa
Okay.
except a tram that runs from Naha to Kasue,
Really?
right? Yeah, it's a short distance.
Okay.
So if you really want to go to, those beautiful places, right, in Okinawa, you have to take a bus,
Right.
but that's a pain in the as well because you don't really find a lot of buses. That's
Yeah.
something really difficult to find in Okinawa. So, and one of the reasons why I find this thing really interesting is that if you don't really have a car, you can feel it's really hard for you to enjoy what Okinawa offers you, right?
Okay.
So I had to go to a driving school, and they don't really give admission to someone who doesn't know much Japanese because
Really?
the instructors, right, they don't really know English. And that's when, I had to lie about, understanding the level of Japanese that's needed to really take the classes. But I was
Uh,
like, okay, I'm gonna figure it out. I think I'll manage it. And yeah, I just got the license, so I think you can do it as well.
wow. Okay, but
Yeah.
you recommend having a car though.
Yeah, I do recommend having a car because without it, it's really difficult to, go to places in Okinawa.
Okay.
The public transportation, to be honest, is really not that good.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah. Now that I think about it, I feel like there are buses, but they don't run that often. Usually, they're not like actually that convenient. I think, and then not really trains. It's more just cars.
Yeah.
Yeah, very different from Tokyo in that sense. But at least parking is pretty easy. There's plenty of space, pretty cheap, I would imagine. Whereas it can be an absolute nightmare in Tokyo.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Do you ever think about maybe trying to work somewhere other than Japan? Like go either back to Nepal or try to go somewhere else? Or do you think you'll be in Japan maybe long term or at least for the time being?
So, since coming to Japan was a random decision for me, so I was like, okay, I'll go, and I think I would move to the United States, sooner or later. But as I've already lived, almost 2 years in Japan,
Mm,
I think it's because I live in, a really carefree sort of place, right,
mm,
in Okinawa,
mm,
and, not having to face, enough trouble in the company I work in,
mm.
and the people are nice, the place is nice, as I've already told, right? I
Yeah,
actually definitely look to live long right now, so
mm,
I changed my mind. So yeah,
I see.
I'm looking
So
forward
maybe
to
when you
living for long in
mm.
Japan. Yeah.
So when you first moved here, maybe you thought it would just be for a little while, like a stepping stone potentially, because you had decided that you didn't want to be in Nepal anymore, just for your career. So Japan would be maybe the next step, and then you're maybe hoping to go to the U.S. or somewhere else from there. But you kind of fell in love with Okinawa. It sounds like.
Yeah, I think I should say that I fell in love with Okinawa
Mm.
rather than I fell in love with Japan for now.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe the rest of Japan is still, I mean, it still remains to be seen, how you would feel about actually living there. But I think just even being based there, there's a lot of options. Like I see from time to time, more companies that allow remote work from outside the city that they're based in, potentially even from other countries occasionally. But a lot of companies will say you can work anywhere in Japan, and plenty will include Okinawa in that. So if you wanted to do something like that, I imagine that would be maybe an option. With the more experience and the more Japanese skills you have, the better. And it sounds like you're making a lot of progress on both of those. So I think you'll have lots of interesting opportunities going forward, whether you want to stay or come, try living somewhere else in Japan.
Yeah, and one thing I actually hear a lot on the internet and specifically on LinkedIn is,
Mm,
people telling how hard it is to get into the tech industry if you don't really know Japanese.
mm,
But I think to the people who actually want to get in, as I mentioned earlier as well, they should consider, looking for opportunities in Okinawa, right? Because
mm,
even though, there's no other way around, not learning Japanese, you have to do that, but you
mm.
can get in pretty easily, right?
Right.
Me
And you
being
don't
one of those guys, so yeah.
you don't need to speak Japanese when you arrive. You just need to be open to learning it once you do, right?
Yeah,
So as long as you're genuinely willing to learn once you get here, then it sounds like
right.
there are quite a few opportunities potentially.
Yeah, that's
Hmm,
what I have experienced till date.
cool. And I guess in terms of like your work, do you feel like the tech stack that you're using and everything is like pretty transferable? Like if you were to go just theoretically to work in like America or somewhere like that, do you think it would prepare you well for like working overseas and you're not being like held back by like the tech or anything like that?
Well, I think in order to get a decent job
Mm,
in markets like the United States or
mm,
other countries like Australia or the UK, right, you
mm,
really need to have a foundational knowledge about the DSA and stuff.
mm.
But again, I've talked to, all the engineers who have been working in major tech companies in Tokyo as well, right? They talking about how the companies really wouldn't care about the DSA and stuff. I mean,
Yeah.
not all of them, but you can still get in with the experience you have and or the projects you've done or the number of years you've dedicated yourself working on a particular tech stack, right? Or a particular domain, right? That the company
Yeah.
is willing to hire you. But I think it's not really the case in countries like the States. So you really need to have very good knowledge of the DSA. So I wouldn't really say that you will get into the market very easily unless you really prepare for that yourself.
I see. Yeah, I think in Tokyo it's a mixed bag. Some of the bigger companies do some like leak code style, like data structure algorithm type exams. Also, some don't, and it's more like take home tests and stuff like that. So it's a mixed bag in Tokyo. And then if you go to like Silicon Valley, the US, most of it is going to at least have some sort of like data structure algorithm test,
Yeah.
leak code, hacker rank, whatever, codility type tests. So you'll probably want to do like some focused like study of those topics, even if you have been working in Japan for a bit. Otherwise, you would probably not be able to pass those, unfortunately. But yeah, that makes total sense as long as you do that. And I mean, you're working with Python, Django. These are always going to be valuable, I think, technologies, even if it's if you're doing like Rails or whatever TypeScript based stuff instead. Like front end, back end. It's all the same kinds of concepts, I would say. They're not that different. So I think it would prepare you pretty well, it sounds like. So yeah.
I do remember myself as well taking the, codility test in order to get into the company I'm working in, right? So there were a bunch of, DSA related questions and then
Oh,
a few system design questions that I had to prepare for.
okay.
And yeah, but after getting here and talking to other engineers, talking to other people in the market, right? I don't think that is the case with every company in Japan.
Yeah, exactly. It depends on the company. Cool. So I don't know. I mean, do you have any like advice that you would give to someone who, for example, if they are looking, maybe they're living in Nepal or somewhere, and they are looking at Japan as an option to work as a software engineer? Is there anything maybe that you would have done differently or that you would give as advice to someone now who's just kind of looking at getting a job going forward?
And talking about myself, as for things that I would have done differently, is to be well prepared about how much effort that I need to give in about Japanese, right? Learning Japanese, 'cause it's really hard to work in a pure Japanese company, right? That doesn't really have a lot of foreign engineers because the software engineering job, it's not just about coding, right? It's about you need to talk to your colleagues, you need to talk to your projects manager as well,
Yeah.
supervisors as well, right? And it gets hard if you don't really know Japanese. So I would have really worked a little harder if I had known that. And to anyone looking for opportunities in Japan, I would like to say that even for the junior positions, right, there are definitely a lot of opportunities. It's not just about Okinawa, but I've been hearing about other prefectures and places in Japan like Ehime as well, who are actively hiring people from India, Bangladesh, and Nepal, right? And I've heard about companies sponsoring the visa and providing subsidies and all to really get settled in Japan. So they just have to look it up, and yeah, I don't think that's gonna be a big of an issue if you just look it up on the internet.
So yeah, maybe put it. I mean, first of all, understand the difficulty of learning Japanese. That it's not going to be quick and easy. It's like a
Yeah.
significant undertaking, and maybe start working on the Japanese as early as possible. I mean, I think probably coming to Japan with already a decent base in the language would probably help a lot as well. Because I know you pretty much started from zero, right?
All right.
Yeah, so maybe if you are planning to come to Japan, start working on the language earlier, like as early as possible. I think would probably help a lot too, and consider Okinawa as like a possibility because it sounds like there's going to be demand. It can be a good thing that companies here are looking to maybe save a little bit of cost, and as a result, hire more people from places like Nepal. And I do think that that's a trend of some companies are even making offices in, I mean, especially I've seen like India and like Southeast Asia, but I think Nepal as well. And like just being more conscious of engineers from there. And so it could be a chance, for anyone who wants to move to Japan from one of those countries as well, because the demand is probably higher than it would have been maybe a few years ago. So it sounds like you have built a really awesome kind of career and life in Okinawa. It's very unique. I haven't talked to too many other software engineers. Like, as you mentioned, it's not a huge amount of people that are like English speakers there, but maybe it'll increase, as there are hopefully going to still be kind of remote work opportunities and stuff like that going forward. So maybe there'll be more and more of a community kind of that can be built there, and more and more people, more success stories like yours of people who are able to come to Japan and build a really nice life. So thank you so much for kind of sharing a lot of your insights. It's a really unique story, and I think people can learn a lot from it. Is there anywhere that people can go to maybe connect with you if they're interested in maybe working in Okinawa, or like chatting with you? Like, do you have social media or something like that people can look you up on?
Yeah, so people can connect actually on my LinkedIn
Okay.
and the Facebook as well.
Sweet. So we can include some links in the description for anyone who wants to, learn more of what Raj has been up to. Maybe reach out if you have kind of questions about working in Okinawa or anything like that. But yeah, I think that's pretty much it for this episode of the Japan Dev Podcast. Thank you so much for joining. And whoever is watching this, if you have thought that it was valuable, please do subscribe to the channel. Give us a like on the video and leave us a comment, and we will be sure to check those and get back to you. So let us know. Thank you so much for watching.